Accessing agent files. Brian Sovryn. Early 21st century anarchist. Creator and host of the podcast Sovryn Tech. By the year 2021, the show would be instrumental in the downfall of various conservative ideologies in the government, helping usher in an incredible time.
Hey, want to take a walk on the wild side and experience the bleeding edge of technology? Then get ready, because it doesn't get much more edgy than this. You're in for a wild ride. You're listening to Sovryn Tech with your host, the man in triple black, the golden stallion of the tech world, Brian Sovryn. He's got a huge brain. And now here's Brian.
Everything is horrible! Yes, it is. Maybe it isn't. I don't know. We're going to find out. The Golden Stallion here with you. Do not fear too much. We have a lot to talk about this week. Some pretty crazy things, no doubt about it. So keep listening. Got a whole show. And you know what? Unfortunately, I know there's some people that don't like it when I do this, but I got to say, probably 70 to 75% of this episode is going to have to do with blockchain technology. So got that right out of the way. If you don't want to hear about that, you don't have to listen. But you may want to, because I'm getting, as usual, proven right once more on things that I have been called particularly crazy about. But we'll get into those in a minute. Let's do the rapid fire stories. Let's go. So first, this is actually some degree of good news, especially if you're a Chromebook user like myself. And I know I have quite a few listeners that are Chromebook users. And good for you, because it's a very secure platform to be using. And now it's a very adaptable platform, because 4 Android apps, we talked about this before, it was mentioned at Google I/O 2014, 4 Android apps are now available for Chrome OS. Not for Chrome, the web browser, but for Chrome OS specifically. And the 4 apps are Evernote, Vine, Duolingo, and SiteWords. Now, 3 of those, probably everybody knows what they are, but SiteWords, of course, that's a children's reading app. It's pretty cool for what it is. And actually, to their credit, I was totally expecting, because they're basing what they wanted to, what Google said they would bring over was based upon what, the users wrote into them and said, or emailed into them and said, okay, we want this app, we want this app. And I'm kind of shocked that Skype was not the top of the list. But maybe it was, because they said they are working with the developers specifically. And I can only imagine, Google and Microsoft working together would be an atrocity of all time. It just, there's no way that could work well. So anyway, but the 4 apps that are available are Evernote. I imagine that's very popular. Vine, of course, that's the Twitter video app. I could see that being popular. In fact, a lot of people expected Twitter, the Twitter app itself, to be pretty popular on Chrome OS. Now, you could say, why would people vote for that when you could just use the website? Well, I think part of that comes from the desire to use, the Twitter app has a lot of interesting features, to say nothing of the fact of the filtered pictures it allows you to take, etc. So I could see the appeal for it. Duolingo is a great language learning tool, and I totally understand why that got transferred over. And these are running natively. This is the amazing thing. A lot of people are wondering, how exactly was this going to work? Were they going to emulate it, like how you would play an NES game on a Windows machine? How are they going to pull this off? And come to find out that there is an actual Android stack built into Chrome OS. So that's interesting, because that means that potentially, if someone could crack into that, of course, the secure nature of Chrome OS probably wouldn't allow it, but you could essentially run any Android app in Chrome OS, which I think is really exciting. But then, so what exactly is Google doing in working with the developers and deciding which ones to bring over? Why not just flood everything on there? Well, apparently they're making it work. They're making the apps work better. They're enhancing their ability to interact with a mouse/touchpad and keyboard. So that's what that's all about. And I'm excited. I think it's great. I checked out the Duolingo app. That's about the only one I would use out of this, out of the four here, and worked really well, very smooth, looked great. And it actually, here's the beauty of it too, is it gives you the tablet apps, which not a lot of people have messed with. More people mess with, obviously the smartphone apps versions, for Android, but you actually get the tablet apps, which I think is pretty cool. So, nice touch. It's good to see Google delivering. It's good to see any tech company delivering on what they say they're going to do, especially something that's kind of this far out. And I like it. It works really well. So, but let's go to another tech company, and this being Yahoo. And it was announced this week. Boy, if you needed any more excuses to see, just how insane the elephant in the room the government is, Yahoo just a couple of years ago was ordered. This is information. This is not a recent happening, but it's recently revealed. They were ordered to hand over user data, email, etc., to the NSA. And Yahoo actually said no to the NSA, we've discovered. But then they said, well, every day that you don't, this is, the U.S. government, the NSA talking, every day that you don't give us that user information we request, we're going to fine you $250,000. Not a month, not a year, every day. So what do? They know if a company actually takes a strong stand, we'll just hit you in the pocketbook. That's what always works, right? Please tell me how is that not, just an incredibly, evil act to do against users? Kudos to Yahoo for standing up, but wow. This is why I think a lot of these companies want a lot more transparency, because I think, if I was Yahoo, Google, Microsoft, Apple, whatever, I would want to say, look, we tried, but these asshats in DC said, if you don't, fine, we're not going to, because how ugly would it look if, men with guns went running in and said, hand over the user data. Imagine the video footage of that, of people going into, a full SWAT team or something going into Yahoo's data centers. Oh, it'd be a PR nightmare. So they just say, well, no, we're not going to come after you with guns. We're just going to, pretty much fine you out of existence. Because, $250,000 a day is going to add up fast. Pretty twisted shit. Now, how about a leak that may have nothing to do with the government, or maybe it has everything to do with it? Who knows? No one really knows the nature of this, but 5 million Gmail passwords apparently were revealed this week. But this brings to light some interesting points. And the interesting points I think that it brings to light are that apparently a couple days after this was announced, and this was, of course, a very hot story, I don't blame people. They're very concerned. Their Gmail password, could be out there. And boy, if someone gets your Google account, you could be in some serious trouble. But apparently they may not have been Gmail passwords at all. The whole thing, they knew pretty early on that this was very old data. So no one knows when or how or why this was necessarily collected. But now they're saying apparently it might not even have been Gmail passwords. So essentially, a lot of news sites, say one's owned by Gawker or, pick the news site, CNET, whatever, got a lot of big hits over just a quick headline that may have been just a total lie. And this really brings to head for me why I don't like to, on Sovryn Tech, why I don't like to always talk about the hottest story of the day, because usually information will come out, be it a couple days or even a week later, and you'll find out that it was all meaningless, that it actually had no bearing on your personal life whatsoever. We live in a world where it's all about, getting clicks and getting, and this isn't new to any of my listeners, but, it's all about getting clicks. It's all about getting people to get to your webpage. And so the most sensational stuff will get put out there and the headlines will be as sensational as possible. And so my point being is that even with something as serious as a password getting leaked, you read that, okay, fine, go change your password, but then take a breather and wait and see what gets found out at all times with any of these security issues. Like when Bad USB came out, the absolute worst security issue in computer history, in my opinion. What are you going to do about it? There's nothing that you can do about it. So, I mean, yes, it's important to be aware of it and to, maybe think about it a bit, but calm down, because, I mean, people were like freaking out. And in fact, they were going to websites, because they said there was websites where you could check and see if your email was one of the ones that was affected by this password leak. Come to find out, some of those websites were malicious. So, I mean, there's just this total play on so many fears. And nobody took 2 seconds to actually say, woo, let's stop for a second and think about this. What actually happened here? Changing your password every once in a while, I mean, that never hurts a damn thing. Do that as often as possible. So, that's not an irrational reaction to stories like this. But please, when you read these kinds of stories, just take a minute. Don't freak out right away. So anyway, that's my point on that. OneDrive. I want to talk about this a little bit. OneDrive, and I don't know if I've said this on the show in the past, but really OneDrive, which is Microsoft's cloud service, which, competes with Dropbox and Google Drive and Box. OneDrive is really, boy, it seems like every week they just keep adding in features. And I really put it, as far as cloud storage services, I put it as, for the out of the big ones, out of the big names. Because granted, this doesn't have, end-to-end encryption and all that stuff. There's very particular services that allow for that, which I've talked about in the past. But out of the major, cloud services out there, I really think OneDrive is the best thing going, hands down. And they just got better. I mean, they put in, now you can upload files of the size of 10 gigabytes. Ooh, boy. And they increase the speed at which the upload speed as well. They do like this parallel upload, which is pretty wild. But yeah, up to 10 gigabytes. And now also they have, and this actually bests what I'm about to tell you, just bests what Google Drive offers, in that you can upload folders, because before you could just upload files. But now you can actually upload a folder, an entire folder. Now, the reason this bests Google Drive can do that too, but only if you're using Chrome. It's like a locked out feature, or a locked in feature into the Chrome ecosystem. So they just, so Microsoft took that and ran with it, and they said, well, we'll offer it on everything. And they do. And it works really well. And again, it has that parallel uploading, so it happens really fast. But I got to give Microsoft credit. I mean, they're offering, because here's the thing. Okay. So they offer you a terabyte of storage. Actually, for $10 a month, they offer you a terabyte of storage for up to 5 other people. So you're actually paying, like, say you have a family, okay, as to where Google would charge you, $5 or $10 for a terabyte per person. OneDrive, Microsoft will give you 5 people to hand out that 1 terabyte to. And not only that, but that $10 is actually a subscription to to Office 365. So you get the most popular Office software out there, with all the latest updates and accoutrements and whatever, for $10 a month. And then you get a terabyte of cloud storage to boot. And you get to share that Office 365 account with up to 5 people. And thus everybody gets a terabyte. Not everybody shares 1 terabyte. They all get a separate terabyte. I mean, this is a phenomenal service that they're offering for a really low price in comparison to everybody else. I mean, now Dropbox is dropping their prices. Google Drive is probably going to try and drop their prices, but still nobody's offering like Microsoft is. I mean, it's really fantastic. So as far as the big names out there, OneDrive's really the one. And in fact, I use their app on Android, and I back up my pictures to it. I don't use Google Plus to back up my pictures. And it does a great job, and it backs up my videos too. It's awesome. I love it. So if you're wanting that best, popular cloud storage service, I really think that it happens to be OneDrive. Speaking of something else that Microsoft might be besting the world at, and we're going to talk about this more during Tech Roulette, because a lot of people wanted to, what do you think about what happened with Apple? I will talk about that. But Microsoft next month may have a watch coming out. And I've talked about how, I didn't necessarily think it was a watch, but regardless, they're just following the crowd, and everybody's coming out with a smartwatch, so they're going to do the same thing. And so keep your eye out for that. And theirs might actually end up being the best, because I think what Microsoft really needs to do, and what I think any company needs to do, and again, I'll talk about this more during Tech Roulette, is they need to release a band, not a watch. I think that's that's where a lot of people are like, I don't want to wear a watch. But if you just change it to where it's a smart band instead of a watch, even though it has similar functionality to the smart watches out there in Android Wear and whatever, I think you'll find people will be way more accepting of it, because they'll think it's something new and not just, some gimmick that they're putting on their wrist. So keep your eye out for that. I'm looking forward to see what Microsoft has before I get excited about any of these wearables, that are out there. Because by and large, especially the Android Wear offerings, I think they don't blow up my skirt. So, and then one more bit here, Bitcoin and PayPal. Boy, who called that one? Literally 2 days after the release of last week's Sovryn Tech, the big release came out that, there was this video being made that mentioned that, Braintree, which is a subsidiary of PayPal, was going to work with Coinbase and accept Bitcoin. And I said, look, I was like, before you know it, believe me, this relationship between Bitcoin and PayPal is going to happen. And 2 days later, bingo, there it was. No one else announced it before then. No. Nobody said 2 words, but you got the inside scoop right here on Sovryn Tech. Of course, I tweeted it actually like an entire week and a half before that, but that was the earliest that you heard about it on Sovryn Tech. So anyway, just letting you know, you get some pretty exclusive info here, and usually the Golden Stallion ends up being pretty right about his predictions. So anyway, let's get into the main story. And this is, boy, when I started off the show saying everything is horrible, well, here's our proof. It has come to my attention, this technology, this organization followed me on Twitter a few days ago, and I was like, oh, what is this? And it's called BitNation, and the website to check it out is bitnation.co. And BitNation is like, oh, is this like some kind of cool, hip, like a Bitcoin news website? No, not at all. This is, by its own taglines, governance 2.0. I'm reading directly from the website here. BitNation is a fully inclusive governance system. BitNation offers a full range of services traditionally done by governments. We provide a cryptographically secure ID system, blockchain-based dispute resolution, marriage and divorce, land registry, education, insurance, security, diplomacy, and more through a fully distributed platform. This is borderless. BitNation does not care where in the world you are from, where you live, or what passport you hold. Everyone has the right to enjoy high-end, competitive governance services. Decentralized, BitNation operates on the blockchain, a cryptographically secured public ledger distributed amongst all of its millions of users around the world to ensure peer-to-peer autonomy. Voluntary. These are like, breakdowns of what it does. Voluntary. BitNation is dedicated to the open source philosophy and provides a platform for users to develop their own governance functions or fork the code and create a brand new governance system. And here's a quote from the founder and CEO of BitNation, Suzanne Tarkowski-Tempelhoff. Only a free and dynamic market of governance services can produce the highest quality at the lowest cost, as well as constant innovation for its customers. Now, there's a lot more to read here. You can look into it, and I recommend you do look into it. But I want to mention another team member that's on here that may never get publicly or may never get officially announced, but it has been publicly released that this person is involved. And that person's name is Charles Hoskinson. I'll get into my critiques and what I feel about all this governance 2.0 business, to say nothing of the fact that they're being very cautious in using the word governance when really it should just say government, but they're trying to get people to not think of it as government when in reality that's all it is. But regardless, Charles Hoskinson, this guy, People usually when he is away or finally whenever he leaves a project, sometimes the project rises, sometimes it falls. But he has been involved in Mastercoin. He has been involved in BitShares. He has been involved in Ethereum. And he was involved in the Bitcoin education project. How many people have heard of that? I mean, neither. But this is another project where Hoskinson gathered a ton of money. And in fact, the claim here, as I understand it, was supposed to bring in 1 million additional Bitcoin users by 2014. And no one's heard about this or what even the deal was with this. Okay. Now, how many of these projects actually have something out there? Now, we've got a couple of them that have something out there. Finally. Okay. Mastercoin's relevance could be argued it didn't happen until MadeSafe came out. But keep in mind that he jumped from each of these companies. Why? If these are such great products, and I'm not saying they're not, if they're such great things, why isn't he still on board with them? What's the deal? Why is he no longer with Ethereum? Wasn't he the big guy with Ethereum, wanting to re-engineer society? I'm not going to necessarily be able to answer that question as to why he's not with any of these things anymore, but I think you should consider that we have these projects that have collected a lot of money, and no one's gotten any return out of them yet, if ever. What's the common denominator? So there's my initial caution with getting involved with BitNation. But now let's talk about this whole idea. And first thing I actually want to say is that I had said, when I was talking about Ethereum a few episodes ago, I had said, it's so nuts. And the blockchain, by and large, and it could easily be said that it is all about making contracts, right? I had said that what kills me is that so many people consider love a contract, like marriage, and divorce and all this stuff. And I said that blows my mind that you would put love into that level of like legality, that you would consider it a legal construct. And I said, I'm worried that blockchain technology was going to get used to define that. And what happened? I get emails, I get tweets, I get people saying to me, Brian, no one's ever gonna put marriage on the blockchain. Oh, what's this BitNation? Let's see. We offer a full range of services on the blockchain, including marriage and divorce. Who's crazy now saying that someone didn't want entire lives and everything you do and all the forms of government, not governance, government getting put onto the blockchain? Who's crazy now? It isn't me. I said in that very same Ethereum episode, I said that if you need technology to solve the problem, you didn't solve the problem. We don't need government services, whether it's on the blockchain or by the gun. They're not necessary. The point is to get rid of government, not replace it. What's the point of Bitcoin? Don't everybody answer at once. What's the point of Bitcoin? Well, if you read the white paper by Satoshi Nakamoto, the point of Bitcoin was to get the power into the hands of the people, to eliminate banks, to eliminate control structures that are holding people down, to eliminate control structures, not replace, eliminate, get rid of. A couple episodes ago when I had the lovely and hyper-intelligent Dr. Stephanie Murphy on, I think that there's a bunch of people out there where they don't want to level the pyramid of power. They want to be on top of it. Well, here you go. And these people aren't the only ones either. In fact, unfortunately, I have so much to talk about during this episode. I may not be able to get to this. Hopefully I'll get to it later. But IBM has now figured out what to do with blockchain technology. And I'm just going to say this, combine IBM with their Smart Planet provision, with Watson, with a lot of other things, and boy, you've got a recipe for some serious disaster that I cannot wait to talk about with you. I love the idea of Bitcoin. I love what blockchain technology can do. There's a lot of ways it's going to be implemented that really do set people free and put an end to a lot of these control structures that are out there. I can't wait. I support them with everything I've got. I love it. But putting government, or in their carefully used terms, governance, onto the blockchain is completely antithetical to my entire ideology. And I would be very cautious about having someone on board who's been involved with 4 different companies in around a year and has raised a ton of money and then either left or got kicked out of all of them. I think a lot of people are probably pretty excited about this BitNation thing because, hey, here it is. Contracts. Woo! Woohoo! Contracts. Oh, give me those contracts. I need them. I gotta have contracts. And hey, woo! We got another fundraiser. Yeah, give me that fundraiser. What am I going to get out of it? Oh, shit. Well, fine. You go to BitNation. It's getting released in about 27 days as of this recording, where you could put in some money into it. Money into something that you have no actual product out of. Go ahead. Do that in rational investment one more time, because everybody already gave a shit ton of cash to Ethereum, and you didn't get anything from them either.
Are you searching for your soulmate? Someone you can trust, who will never betray you? Or cooperate with the NSA? Stop searching. With EasyDNS, you found a keeper. EasyDNS does it all. Domain names, web hosting, and managed WordPress hosting. EasyDNS stands up for your internet freedom, and with servers in Canada, they do not cooperate with the NSA. Go to easydns.com. You'll love their services or get a full refund. They guarantee it. And they accept Bitcoin. That's easydns.com.
Hello, Mr.
Sovryn. Brian Sovryn. And yours?
Natalia. Care to play a game of roulette?
I'd love to.
Number and color?
69. Black.
As you wish. Tech Roulette.
Woo! It is time for Tech Roulette. And boy, you know, some have expressed, boy, aren't you worried what some people might say? You kind of named some names, sort of insulted some people. Yeah, boy, they might use the blockchain on me. Oh, wait a minute. That's exactly what I was warning about, that the blockchain could be used against somebody. Anyway, moving on. Yeah, wouldn't that be funny if people that are all about, you know, supposedly removing governance and creating competing governments would actually use the system in some malicious way against what I have to say? That'd be a hoot. Not that ever happens in the libertarian community, but what I want to talk about now is Apple. A lot of people are asking about Apple and how I felt about their big reveal of the iPhone 6 and the 6 Plus. I mean, getting into the specifications of it all may not necessarily be interesting. I think anybody, I mean, when Apple holds an event, really, the world does stop. I mean, the productivity just ends. In fact, I worked for a tech company. I worked for PAR Technologies, and really any time there was a WWDC or any big event that Apple was going to hold, you were guaranteed no one's picking up the phones. No one's, you know, it all just comes to a halt. And it makes sense. I mean, because Apple really are master engineers. They're phenomenal at what they do. I give them a lot of credit. I used to be a very big Apple fanboy until they really started to, in my opinion, backpedal. Like the G4 was probably the greatest processor ever created, and they just, it's been downhill since then, in my opinion, anyway. But yeah, the iPhone 6 obviously it was reacted to with marvelous positive reception. And perhaps rightfully so. I mean, pretty much the 6 Plus is a 5.5-inch phablet, which it's good for Apple to finally play catch-up and, you know, get on board with it. That's actually kind of the story of a lot of the abilities that have been included with the iPhone 6 either model, really. The other one's a 4.7 inch, which is still larger than what most people have bought in the past for an iPhone. But either way, they've really been playing catch up with Android. And one of the big deals, and we're going to talk about this more, we're going to explore this a lot, is the inclusion of NFC, which I don't think anybody expected. I think everybody was really planning on Apple going with iBeacon as far as their interconnectability with commerce, in retail stores and wherever else. And actually, iBeacon admitted, in my personal opinion, I think it's the better technology. I'm actually a little disappointed that Apple went with NFC. I was really cheering them for wanting to push forward something so much more powerful, because NFC and iBeacon, one of the major differences is that iBeacon can interact with your phone, with your software, with your iOS device far sooner by a matter of yards than NFC can dream. I mean, NFC, you got to be right there. So I'm a little disappointed in that, but whatever. They included, NFC in it. iOS 8, the software itself, we've already talked about that in the past, where I think they're doing wonderful things as far as security. And considering also the announcement, which is what we're mainly going to talk about, the announcement of the wallet, the Apple Wallet that came out, having that security is pretty primo. You better have that security. That's really important. So, iOS 8 has a bunch of features like being able to share between apps, cross-sharing apps, which is something that Android has had pretty much since its inception. There are a lot of things where Apple's really playing catch up, but then that's kind of the story of Apple, is that they don't necessarily innovate, even though the iPhone certainly was innovative. They don't necessarily innovate so much as they perfect. And there's nothing wrong with that. I think that's a great thing to perfect, because you want that sooner or later. That's the purpose of, cooperation competition within a marketplace, is to get to that, great product. That's one of the purposes anyway. So kudos to Apple for that. Both devices just look stunning. They're thinner. They have apparently, I think, something along the lines of 50% more battery power. They're really doing a great job. These are gorgeous devices. I would not begrudge anybody getting their hands on these things, especially if you are an iOS user overall. And then there was the Apple Watch. Now, it's not the iWatch, it's the Apple Watch. Which is interesting. I don't know if that's somehow Tim Cook trying to differentiate his product line from what Steve Jobs released. Maybe. Certainly, this is Tim Cook's kind of coup de grace. This is his push into being the man at Apple. But interestingly, he even called it the iWatch. Like he made a flub. He at the big reveal at the conference there. At the announcement, he even called it an iWatch at one point. So that was obviously really the name, and that probably lends a lot of credence to the idea that they have, which they said at the announcement, that they have been developing this for years. So if you end up calling it an iWatch, don't feel bad, because if the CEO of Apple does too, I'd say you're in good company. Now the Apple Watch definitely looks far better than any offering that's coming out of Android Wear. No question about that. Definitely looks a lot better than anything Samsung's doing. Though LG has a pretty traditional looking watch, the GR, I believe it's called. But then it doesn't really have the kind of the smooth lines that the $350, and I believe that's the price point, $350 Apple Watch has. And it is absolutely gorgeous. It looks great. It does have a bit of a flaw. Now, I'm a bit of a watch fan. I wear a calculator watch, the original smartwatch, all the time. And so with watches, one of the ways that you make it so that you don't notice that you're wearing the watch, and that's really what you want, is that you don't want the main watch part, not the band, but where the band and the watch itself actually meet, needs to be really low. It needs to be as close to your wrist as possible, as close to the skin as can be. And the Apple Watch actually, as I noticed it, was raised decently to where that's not the case. So it's going to feel a little odd on there. Also, I read some reports from some certain, watch lovers as well, that said that there's your cuff when you're wearing a suit or a nice shirt or a long sleeve, this watch will keep your cuff from going down. And that's a big no-no in the watch world. The watch always has to be low enough to where the cuff goes over it. So you've got some fashion issues there, certainly. It comes in 2 different sizes, but regardless, it is gorgeous. You know, despite those couple little design flaws, it is gorgeous. It uses the crown, which is normally what you would wind up your watch with. You know, it's a physical button, and I applaud the use of a physical button instead of all touchscreen, you know. It uses the crown to do a lot of the controls. I thought that was pretty cool. So nothing wrong with all of that. There is the issue, though. No one knows just how reliant the watch is upon your phone, upon the iPhone, or if it's going to allow for any kind of cross-platform, which I think Apple might be foolish to not do that, but also I wouldn't put it past them to not be interested in that sort of thing. You know, they want people in their ecosystem. But that's not to say they wouldn't do it the other way either. I mean, your iPhone works perfectly well with a Windows machine, right? You know, iTunes runs on Windows. Even Safari for a while was on Windows. So it's not outlandish that they would go cross-platform a bit. And I kind of hope they do. So, yeah, gorgeous watch. In fact, it might be the best looking watch you can get for $350. And that's saying something because honestly, that's pretty low end. You know, in the watch world, it's pretty low end to, you know, for something to only cost $350. Usually you want to be spending 4 digits, or you might as well go home and wear a gummy or a Mickey Mouse watch. So good on them for that. It's great design. Are these things even necessary? No, not really. And most people admit to that, you know, pretty much any commentator admits that they are selling something to you that you have really no need for. And it's just all about some kind of like status symbol, which some would argue, great. That's what great watches do anyway, right? Maybe, you know, I'm open to that. So, but let's talk about the real meat, the really interesting thing that came out of the announcement earlier this week. And that is Apple Wallet. This, above all of these nice technologies that they released, is the really interesting one, and this is the real game changer. This is actually, you know, a lot of people say, well, they haven't had a really great announcement. They haven't had a really great reveal. They haven't put out something really wonderfully new out there since the iPad, which, of course, granted, the iPad is really just, you know, it's a refresh of the Newton. So even that wasn't necessarily such a new idea. But they haven't had that. This is the moment where they did have that, is with Apple Wallet. Now, of course, we can say, well, you know, Google has Google Wallet. You know, there's whatever other, you know, wallet implementations out there. Stripe, right? There's some others, you know, that allow for some of this functionality. While that's all well and good and true, this is the one where Apple is the company that actually got Amex, Visa, MasterCard to really all sit at the same table and say, hey, we want you to be integrated with this. And I think it was an easy sell to do, partly because, like I mentioned, and like we mentioned months ago when iOS 8 was first revealed, iOS 8 is a very secure platform. The Touch ID is, well, maybe they've made it better on the iPhone 6. There was no talk about that because apparently with Touch ID, which Touch ID is the little fingerprint button, the button that doubles as a fingerprint reader on your iPhone, on the 5S, that, you know, if it doesn't recognize your fingerprint, you can't get in. Well, of course, what happened was people would just put that up to a nipple, and the nipple could pretty much mimic, you know, whatever fingerprint, you know, was necessary. It was pretty ugly on a secure terms. But even with that, even with the whole nipple trick, okay, Touch ID is far more secure than your credit card, that physical card, could ever dream of being. And this is true. This is where I think Apple really went to these companies and said, look, we can, you know, all these fraud issues that you have to keep dealing with. And it's true that the credit card companies do certainly lose a lot of money and a lot of time over credit card fraud and, you know, just theft and whatever happens throughout a person's day where, you know, they lose their credit card over a cliff or something. Who the hell knows? So that's true. This is a good deal for the credit card companies because Apple's again, this would all end up being more or less, it'd be client side, but there'd be an encrypted cloud backup to some degree of all this stuff. This is really security that I think the credit card companies would have an absolute orgasm over. So it makes sense that they want to be on board with this. I don't think this is the credit card companies pulling the strings on Apple. I think it's quite the opposite. It is Apple pulling the strings on everybody else. And I'm going to go full out right now, and I'm going to tell you a prediction that I didn't say first. Someone else, some other tech commentator, said during the big reveal, Apple's big reveal this week, he said, I bet in 5 years, Apple's going to have a bank. They're going to have their own bank. Now, that's interesting because, again, like I said last week, because I briefly mentioned that the Apple Wallet was coming because we knew about it ahead of time. Again, Apple is the largest holder, more so than any other company on the planet. They are the largest holder of credit card numbers on the planet. They hold all the keys. They've even got your CVV numbers. They got the whole shit. They got it all. Okay. And also, now, I mean, just picture this. So they've got all that information. And now you could end up using that because it's so simple to have Touch ID just completely interact with the information you already gave them. So many people are just constantly saying, look, I want to get rid of my wallet, as in my physical wallet. I'm tired of carrying this around. We're in the digital age. I send emails. I don't have to mail letters to anybody anymore. Why am I still handing around cash? Why am I still doing all this stuff? Why am I dealing with all this 20th century bullshit when we're in the 21st century and we can just do it all digitally? And I think that's fair. There's an argument to be made for the other side, and I might make it myself, but I understand that whole attitude. Okay. And Apple really, because this is the other thing too, they didn't just get the credit card companies on board with their wallet, with the Apple Wallet system. They got McDonald's. They got a few other companies too to say, yeah, all right, we're going to put in NFC. We're going to make it so that everybody can use, the Apple Wallet system. And so that's the thing, is that Apple really does have just so much clout. And they do. They have a lot of clout that when they say they want something to get supported, pretty much it happens. And I know it's shocking for you to think that, hey, wouldn't you think Google would have this clout to where everybody would use Google Wallet? Apparently not. Now, part of the reasons there is that, of course, Apple's users are statistically far more affluent than most of Google's users. Okay, so when a company hears that Apple's coming out with a wallet, they automatically assume, statistically and probably accurately, that the average Apple user that walks in is going to be somebody who is ready to lay down some money, and a lot of it at that. So they have this tremendous curated customer mystique that really allows everybody to accept it. But then here's this. Here's the really interesting part about it. It doesn't matter what company, all the companies that listed off, there's a few of them that said they're going to accept Apple Wallet. The one that's the most interesting is McDonald's. Because you tell me where there isn't a McDonald's. Exactly. In fact, you know what? It's kind of funny. When I was moving to New Hampshire, I was, of course, moving from New York, and so I went through Vermont. And in Vermont, my cell signal, I just didn't have any cell signal. It was crazy. There was none to be had. And I wanted to upload some videos of my travel. I was kind of, video diarying my move. And I'm like, God, where can I get some Wi-Fi? What the hell? And the only place I'm looking around, and none of these Vermont, even the cafes in Vermont don't have Wi-Fi. And I'm just going around. And finally I saw kind of like this bright light off in the distance, the golden arches of McDonald's. And I said, oh, Wi-Fi. And I went there. And, and it had the Wi-Fi, it had Wi-Fi. And it was really the only major business that I even saw in my entire time driving through Vermont. Now, Vermont has Walmarts and all that stuff. I know that. But I'm just saying, by and large, when you're out in the middle of nowhere, you can kind of count on them. In fact, even, PorcFest, if any of my listeners have gone to PorcFest, and I know many of them have, what was the one place up in Lancaster, New Hampshire that you could kind of count on? There was a McDonald's there. This is huge. This is the fact that they got McDonald's on board is a really, really big deal. And also because the average person that goes to McDonald's makes it attractive to perhaps the people that are not so affluent. So you have this really great wedge into all classes of society. And I wish there wasn't a class of society, but I think there is. Okay, but I mean, it is the world we live in. Now, some people know one notable exception, and this is to prove this point home, one notable exception of, that was missing from the iPhone 6 lineup was an iPhone 6C. I think a lot of people were looking for that. Well, I think that's still coming. No one said it yet that I've heard, but I think that's still coming. I think next year, when they do the iPhone 6S or whatever, I think they will reveal an iPhone 6C, or maybe they'll do it when the next iPad generation comes out. And then this will be that way to get into the lower end. And then everybody's going to be like, holy shit, there's this great way, the new way to spend money that's really, really easy. And it's whatever, all the cool people are doing. They're all using Apple Wallet. Now I can get in on the Apple Wallet with the iPhone 6C. That'll probably cost me practically nothing, as long as I go with a 2-year contract and become a slave to the telecoms, whatever. And then you really have Apple very much grabbing everybody by all these, all the credit card companies, grabbing the financial institution by the balls. Really. And they've done this before. The music industry was like, oh, wow, we're losing money. Let's do this digital thing with Apple. Again, we're talking circa, 2001, 2000, the time of the iPod. Let's get involved with this because this is really hot. And what happened is that Steve Jobs, and you can read about this in various books like Dogfight and some others, where Steve Jobs, he was just, he had them by the balls and he squeezed to no end. And the music industry couldn't say yes or no to any of it. All they could do is, okay, Steve, whatever you say, we'll do that. Apple has that kind of, they have that repertoire. They have that ability to really take over an entire industry because they've done it before. Now, you can say Spotify's loosening that up. Sure, yes, technologies can come around that can do things far better. Nothing lasts forever. But they really could pull this off to where Apple, I think, could eliminate, and again, I'm not the only one that says this, I think Apple could eliminate cash in its entirety. And I think that they could really, they could shake up the financial institution. Like if they actually did want to come out with a bank, and there's been big companies out there, companies that have been bigger than Apple in the past, like Walmart, that have tried to create their own banks, but then they say, no, you can't have a bank, Walmart, and whatever. But Apple might actually get it to the point to where, hey, maybe they can make that power play. I'm very open to that. But regardless of whether or not they're going to end up eliminating cash or creating their own bank or whichever, the one thing I think they do have the absolute power over, and please, I hope you know how much I love Bitcoin because I do. But I think that Apple's wallet makes Bitcoin, in the common eye, in the societal view, worthless. I think Apple Wallet could potentially kill Bitcoin. I thought Amazon could kill Bitcoin too. And that's a whole other subject about Apple versus Amazon, but it's interesting to point out that, within days of the information that that the Apple Wallet was coming out, suddenly PayPal's playing nice with Bitcoin. And I think that's because they know it's the only infrastructure out there that could possibly compete with Apple's wallet. And of course, Apple Wallet is probably one of Apple's only ways of knowing that they could somehow compete with Amazon. And I'm not going to give, I've talked about Amazon so much on this show, I'm not going to give the big rundown of that. But either way, the tech world has moved into the financial realm in a controlling way. And I don't know who's going to come out on top, but I'm going to tell you this, it may not be Bitcoin. I know a lot of people think inevitably it's going to be Bitcoin, or that Bitcoin's going to somehow get integrated into Apple Wallet. Look, I told you, the reason that Apple banned Bitcoin, wallets from iOS was because they knew what they were doing. They were going to come out with their own killer of it. I don't think Bitcoin's going to get integrated. If it does, it'll be long. If they ever do integrate it, in my opinion, it'll be when Bitcoin's worth about $1 a Bitcoin. Now, Tim Draper, of course, says, hey, no, don't be pessimistic about this. It's going to be worth $10,000 no matter what, I guarantee you. Okay, maybe at some point, but Apple Wallet grows and grows and grows. You get the iPhone 6C, you get a lot of this other stuff. You get to the point to where Tim Cook starts to squeeze on those balls he's got his hands all over. And believe me, in the popular eye. Look, nobody knows about Bitcoin. It's still such a small thing. Nobody knows. That's great that Dell takes it. That's great that all these big companies take it, but people don't know. They don't know about it. You can walk up to your parents, hey, did you hear about this Bitcoin? Oh, yeah, isn't that a legal thing that I saw on Almost Human? I mean, that's the mentality that people have about this stuff, regardless of whatever legitimate, quote-unquote, legitimate, I use that word very cautiously, the word legitimate, legitimate company out there takes it. It's still got this ugly aura. Now, that doesn't mean that Bitcoin wouldn't still be useless. And in fact, at the end of the day, even if Apple Wallet took out Bitcoin, in my opinion, it's a good thing because then Bitcoin returns to its proper place as the money of freedom, as the money of rebels, as the money of people that are trying to change the world instead of the money that's just propping up a failing economic system that's been pushed for hundreds of years. I'll be back with more.
There's a lot of confusing information out there about Bitcoin mining. Customers have been burned by companies taking their money on pre-orders for Bitcoin mining equipment, only to receive their equipment late and miss out on opportunities to mine Bitcoins. But that doesn't mean Bitcoin mining is impossible. You just have to find an honest company to do business with. If you want to mine Bitcoins and you want to do it now, no pre-orders, no waiting. Look into the Antminer products from Bitmain. Their competitively priced Antminers are in stock and shipped from the US as soon as you pay. You could buy an Antminer today and be mining Bitcoins tomorrow. The Antminer line offers the best mining power per dollar currently available. 20% of the mining power in the Bitcoin network is contributed by Antminers. Not only that, but Bitmain is committed to support. You can get tech support and warranty service over the phone by calling 844-BITMAIN. For commercial accounts, they'll even travel to your data center to install your equipment. Get all the details at bitmaintech.com. That's bitmaintech.com.
You're a lucky man, Mr. Sovryn. Not many win so well at the game of chance.
That's because it's not a game of chance, Natalia. It's a game of choice.
Game of choice.
It is time for Game of Choice, and it's also time for me to calm the fuck down. Because I think I got a little too hyped up over the past couple segments. But boy, I mean, I consider them such important topics that, you know, I mean, they need to be covered. And that doesn't mean I'm not still going to get even more excited later on, because I am going to talk about what IBM is doing with blockchain technology during Hacksec. So keep a listen up for that. But boy, if you got to take a break, here is a game for you. I was so excited when I saw that this got released, really, because this is a very inspirational game. In fact, this is a game that I've taken a lot of cues because I consider it such great design. I mean, yes, it had its flaws, but such great design that I'm taking a lot of cues for it for my first game that I'll be releasing from Zomia Offline Games, which actually, if you look on my Twitter account, I released a quick picture of some of what you might see within the very first game from Zomia Offline Games. But anyway, this game just came out for Android. As in just a few days ago. It goes for $2.99. Square Enix was kind enough to release it, and it is Dragon Quest, the very first one. Now, some of my listeners, some of my older listeners, like myself, may remember it as Dragon Warrior that came out back in like '86 for the Nintendo, for the NES. And yes, it is that game, and it is awesome still to this day. I got to mess with it a little bit. They really did a great job with releasing Dragon Quest for Android. They did it. The controls feel great. The touch controls feel really good. Everything about it is just so smooth, simple, sleek. Anybody can really pick up this game and start playing it. The graphics upgrade is way better than what they did with because there was a point where I think for the Game Boy Color, they released Dragon Warrior 1 and 2, or maybe it was 1, 2, and 3. Anyway, they re-released them for that system, and that was cool to play it even then. But in this case, they really put it all together. This is probably the best version of Dragon Warrior, or Dragon Quest, I should say, Dragon Quest 1 to this day. They really just did a top-notch job of putting it together. And it's not the only Dragon Quest game available for Android. There's also, and of course they're on iOS too, right? But Dragon Quest 4 and Dragon Quest 8 are also available to play. Now, Dragon Quest IV, that was a huge game to really play. Now, that got re-released for the Nintendo DS a little while back, and it plays similar and looks phenomenal. Dragon Quest VIII is really, if you can, play it on the PlayStation 2 or play it on a PS2 emulator, because they chopped up a lot of what made Dragon Quest VIII so phenomenal of a game. So like the voice acting and other things. But Dragon Quest I, you are getting a pure experience, a beautiful, maybe not a pure experience because it's been upgraded, but a beautiful experience that will really hearken to, your days of playing it on the Nintendo. And it certainly brought back some beautiful memories for me. Just thinking about it and thinking about, what the world was like, honestly, back then when I was like 6 or 7. An awesome game, again, really basic. It doesn't take long to get through, and it only sells for $2.99. Like I said, Dragon Quest IV and VIII, I think they sell for like $20 a pop. So, but you are kind of getting what you pay for. Like Dragon Quest IV is a far more in-depth game than Dragon Quest I is, and of course Dragon Quest VIII is as well. But these are, Dragon Quest is really probably my favorite RPG series. I like them far better than I like the Final Fantasy series. I mean, I like them better than by a long shot, frankly. And Dragon Quest I really started it all. And even though it is a simplistic game, it's a lot of fun. And it's good to get that sense of history, too. And like I said, admittedly, taking a lot of design cues from the Dragon Quest games. So there's a nice little hint into what will be coming from Zomia Offline Games later this year or early 2015. Anyway, pick it up, Dragon Quest. I love it. I'll be back with more. This is Sovryn Tech.
Time now for 90 Seconds on Sex with Dr. Paul.
Some couples enjoy having intercourse during a woman's period. Others avoid it. But when you consider a woman will spend approximately 2,000 days or nearly 6 years of her life menstruating, period sex is something you might consider. If a woman is gynecologically healthy and neither of you has a sexually transmitted infection, there's no medical reason I've seen for not having period sex. Now, some women find they're super horny during their periods, and some report having orgasms more easily when they're in the red. Some find orgasms help with period cramping by pushing more flow out of the uterus. Also, the chances of getting pregnant are less during a period, but it's still important to use birth control. Now, some guys believe that the walls of the vagina will be raw or tender, and it might hurt a woman to have sex while she's on her period. Not true. The walls of the vagina are just fine during menstruation. It's the walls of the uterus that are breaking down to cause period flow. The uterus is different from a vagina, and a penis never goes there. The vagina is simply the channel that the flow drips into in order to reach the outside. Now, in part 2, we'll talk about why some couples need to use sex lube during period sex. We'll also talk about tips for making less mess.
For more, visit 90secondsonsex.com.
You are quite the man, Mr. Sovryn. Are you busy tonight?
Natalia, if you'll excuse me, I just received a very important email.
Later then, Mr. Sovryn. Important email.
Oh, yes, and I have to say, this man has no problem with floating his boat on the Red Seas. No problem whatsoever. And yet you will get part 2. I know Dr. Paul, the real Dr. Paul there, mentioned that there's a part 2 to that. That will be out next week. You will get to hear that. So period sex, I think it's a wonderful thing. It really is. And anyway, I won't go into any more than that. I got a pretty lengthy email that I actually want to read to you, and it's from a listener in Brazil, which is awesome, to have an international audience. I really do appreciate that. So let's see. Great show. You and Stephanie have so many, of course, that being the lovely and hyper-intelligent Dr. Stephanie Murphy, have so many different ideas. You two force me to think differently. That's perfect. I wait the whole week for your show. And of course, Stephanie's on the show very often. So, yeah, and I love having her on. It's great. Let's see, reading on, and he does, English is not his first language. So, and no worries. I thought the email was fantastic. I'd like to ask you some ideas for business. And since you have a lot of crazy ideas, Yeah, this emailer listens to the show. I thought it was worth trying to ask you. Let me give you an overview, and I won't give out his name, but he says he's 23, Brazilian, and saving his family company from bankruptcy. I consider myself a smart guy. We will probably close the company in the end of next year when we finally solve our debt problems. Our tax rate is high, about 30%. Holy shit. That's part of why we are closing the company. Right now, I'm very demotivated, so I don't, he doesn't have any idea. He can't have any ideas. He's having a hard time thinking about what to do. I'd like to do something that doesn't tie me to the ground, like a shop or a cafe, because I believe that my country is going to have a major crisis in the next few years, and we will have high inflation. I know nothing of programming, just basic HTML, but I'm open to learning anything. So there's more to this email, but I want to touch on this. First things first is that tax rate, 30%. Woo, boy. That might be step number one to get away from. In whatever way you can. If you can geographically move. Now, I don't know how tied you are to your family at 23. If to some degree they are perhaps dependent upon you, or, you care very much about them and you want to help them out, then of course, geographically moving may not be viable. But certainly one of the very first things that I would recommend is to get into, cryptocurrencies, and using them as your main, monetary source. I don't know enough about Brazil to say how easy it is to get, Bitcoin or cryptocurrencies converted into a form of cash that you can use there. But that really is step one to do. Now, and maybe actually that might be the idea in and of itself, is to somehow become an authority on cryptocurrencies, and don't limit yourself to Bitcoin. Do not limit yourself to Bitcoin. There is plenty of money and personal growth to be made in other blockchain technologies like Node. There's a new one out there called Node. There's, of course, NXT is just that's just a boom waiting to happen, and it's already happening, just not everybody's recognized it yet. There's BitShares. There's a lot of these things to really get involved in, and you don't have to know coding. You just kind of got to know how to spread that idea to other people. So that's sort of an area where I would really look into. Because especially, like you said, you think that that Brazil, and I don't think this is unfair to think, I think this is going to happen just about anywhere, sadly, you're looking at some hyperinflation coming in the next few years. So you're going to want to be using some kind of currency, regardless of the social stigmas around it, that, will be a bastion against that. And that's cryptocurrencies. So that's one of the booming things I think that anybody can do, including, young people. Is they can become experts in these areas and become, especially because, when hyperinflation occurs, if it's anything like the U.S., there are still mom and pop banks in the United States that don't belong, to the big companies or whatever, or there's credit unions or something like that. And if you could become like an advisor to these banks when that time of inflation comes, or whatever kind of economic collapse would occur, if you could be an advisor to these people on how to use cryptocurrencies, not just Bitcoin, keep that in mind, you could make yourself a very important person very fast. So I think that's perhaps a business idea that I think a lot of people that have a really, that are really curious and obviously very intelligent, and I'm sure my listeners are very intelligent, could really be on top of. And like I was mentioning earlier, even if Apple Wallet ends up taking over the world, and granted it's only going to start in the United States, you are still going to have kind of that underground that there's nothing wrong with an underground existing. You're still going to have that counter market that needs people, intelligent, really, really bright and passionate people involved. And if I were you, that's where I would be looking, especially if I'm in, a country outside of the United States, most certainly. So I hope that part helps. I want to read on a little bit more here. And please, listener, also best of luck to you. I think that's great that you're wanting to be very entrepreneurial, because entrepreneurship is one of the single most important topics that can be discussed today, because I think no matter what part of the world you're in, really, even areas that seem to have economic booms, if you don't make your own job, you're not going to have one. They're not going to be out there. because everything's changing. I was just reading about a company that they hire the best programmers in the world, and that company only operates 4 days a week, 4 hours a day. Okay. Everything is going more towards this very, where these corporate structures just don't exist anymore, and there's no more guarantees. So if you can make your own jobs, get on that and do it out of that passion. That way you can do it while you're working a day job too. Okay. And there's nothing wrong with that. You don't have to hit it out of the park the first time or within the first month. It can take time, but start now. Okay. All right. Let's see. I'm going on with the same email here. I am an atheist, or should I say a-religious or agnostic. I can't get my head around the similarities between the Big Bang Theory and Genesis, the Genesis account. I couldn't think of anything else when you talked about the Noah movie and the emergence of the oceans. Okay, I'll touch on that a little bit. Yeah, it is kind of interesting. If you take a very abstract view of a lot of what we discover, by and large today about the origins of the universe, there are times where some of the things said in the Genesis account smack pretty accurate. In fact, there's even and this is a very abstract, it's such an oversimplification, but when, they were doing messing with the Large Hadron Collider, okay, and they were, working on discovering the Higgs boson, pretty much the conclusion they came to in the most simple terms possible was that the creation of the universe occurred with a collision of sound and light. Huge oversimplification on my part. Okay. But that is how it could be broken down to. And so a lot of people, in fact, a lot of Christians would theorize that when the very first, or the second verse, I should say, not the first verse. The first verse is, in the beginning, God created heaven and the earth. The second verse, when God says, let there be light, you have light, and he said, you have a collision of light and sound, and the universe is created. Huge oversimplification. Please, I know. Trust me, I'm not a fool when it comes to science. I know how this goes down. Okay, but yes, there's that. There's a million other things within the Genesis account that do seem to hold, some odd accuracy when you get down to it. But I think it's also important to keep in mind that the Genesis account is not a Hebrew work. It's not a Jewish work. It's not a Christian work. I think a large chunk, and in fact, when you do textual analysis of the book of Genesis, a couple things happen. You find out that there's actually multiple creation stories within there, as in Genesis chapter 1 and chapter 2 tell two very different stories and two different timelines. And also most scholars, be it rabbis or whatever, will tell you that Genesis was actually written by 5 people, not one. Because the common belief is that it was all written by Moses, but it's actually written by 5 people. Now, the reason I think that is because the book of Genesis is actually an amalgamation of some degree of Hebrew thought and Babylonian beliefs. And Babylonian beliefs and writings pretty much all stem from, Sumer and Akkadian and the like. Okay. And so that's why you have Enuma-Elish, or the Epic of Gilgamesh, as it's more popularly known, why it's there's a ton of similarities between Enuma-Elish and Bereshit, or Genesis, again, as it's more popularly known. So that's really the area that I find to be a bit more interesting. The scientific accuracy is curiosity. But I think at the first place, you want to find out where is the origin of these very words themselves. And it's a really interesting place to explore. And in fact, I've had other listeners email me and contact me, like on SoundCloud and through other venues, saying, boy, I'd love it if you did a podcast about the Bible and ancient civilizations and whatever. I am considering doing that in the near future. But right now, my primary concerns are on getting Zomi offline games going on and the rest. So yes, but emailer, you're right. There are a lot of interesting things to look into with the Genesis account and, of course, the scientific account. To say nothing of the fact, one of the most interesting things is that there wasn't always the belief that the universe even had a beginning, and yet the Book of Genesis does get that right. Now, granted, that was a 50-50 shot, okay, but I don't think that that's something to necessarily write off, because some of the greatest thinkers, particularly in the Greek tradition and in some other histories, said that pretty much the universe was just always here. So that was a pretty good guess, even though, again, it was a 50-50 shot. But let's move on with some more of this email here. Any idea for you, or an idea for you to talk on the show is, why do companies act as dictatorships? Well, let's see, I'll read a little more here. There is a trend to the horizontalization, free marketification, he used, jokingly, of companies. How does it work in real life? I believe Steam, or Valve, works in that way. And what can the entrepreneur gain from using this business model? After all, he will take all the risks and you will have no control over it in the end. Now, why do companies act like dictatorships? This is a great question. And I think the reason is because they are copying the model that works, the model that allows for guaranteed money and success. And what is that model? That model is governance. That model is statism itself, which is another reason I don't want blockchains copying that bullshit. Okay. That is why they do it that way. I mean, this is what's always been taught, is this feudalism, that you have a lord or a CEO, and then it just, it all trickles down from there. But the interesting thing is that, yes, like Valve and some other companies, we're finding out that this doesn't work. And why doesn't this work? Because the real incentive for some of the finest minds on the planet, the people you want to hire, in today's world, is not money. It's not necessarily money. To get the best people, you need to give them the thing that money can't necessarily buy, and that's time. So the company that gives their workers the most time is actually the one that's going to get the best people and probably end up being the most innovative. Okay, I mentioned earlier, I talked about that company that only operates 4 days, where their employees work on they don't have a managerial system. There's no hierarchical managerial system. And this is actually a company in South America. Okay. I'll put a link to it in the appendix of the show notes so you can read up about it. But the point is that this company, they know, okay, that you're only going to get about 4 good hours out of anybody anyway, as far as work goes. And in fact, if one of the fringe benefits of working for them is you have more time to spend with family, or you have more time to spend with loved ones, or doing your own thing, this is just the extension of what Google does already. Google gives you like that 14% of the day to work on whatever you want. This is the logical extension of that, is that if you give people freedom of time, they're going to want to do more within the smaller amount of time. And this is actually one of the beautiful things of trying to get to that free market that we talk about, that we want so badly. And like Kevin Carson talks about, is that, in the future, if there wasn't government, if there wasn't all this hierarchical structure, you'd probably only end up working, maybe 8 hours a week, or, some insanely low number. And yet you'd still be making enough money because the quality of your work would be so great. And, all that stuff put together, it'd be phenomenal. You'd have it. So yeah, non-hierarchical companies also benefits the idea of like people saying, yeah, we're all working towards this goal. I mean, there's so many benefits to having a non-hierarchical company. And listener, if you're looking to make a company, definitely run with that model, because there are so many advantages. To say, nothing of how the employees, the other workers there, shouldn't even call them employees, feel about their place there. Because everybody wants to see the room for advancement, right? In any industry you go into, in any business you go into, if it's a flat pyramid, not an actual pyramid, if it's just a flattened pyramid at the company, then the only way to go is to make the product better, not personally rising up in ranks. And so all that drive gets put into the right place to make a better product. Okay, so it's easily the way to go, and I think it is the clear reason why Valve, or the creators of Steam, have risen so quickly, is because they follow that model, and good for them. So let's see. Also, I think there's not enough anarchist libertarian websites in Brazil. Do you think is worth the hassle? Well, honestly, at this point in the email, you're really, in many ways, you're answering your own question of what can I do? If you feel that there's a lack, that's the market telling you, get to it. I think it's worth it. I think it's worth it because I think the ideas of anarchy, libertarianism, whatever you want to call it, I think people will be looking for it in the coming years. I mean, there's going to be plenty of people looking for stronger statism, no doubt about it. But at the same time, there's going to be, I think, a lot of people that are just looking for that resource. They're just looking for that permission to think that, hey, we don't need government. We don't, and they don't want. Granted, I don't think those are the same people looking for permission, but I think they're looking for reinforcement, for encouragement into the idea that I should be able to govern myself, or that I should be, I'm the individual and I am what matters. People need to hear these things. So yeah, I think that's important. I mean, in fact, the only really website I know of is, I think, Mises Brazil. And I'm not even the biggest fan of the Mises Institute anymore, but regardless, I mean, it is a resource into a lot of truth. So yeah, that's something you could definitely get into, is an anarchist, maybe cryptocurrency hybrid type website. I definitely recommend that. And then of course he goes on, sorry for the messy email and my bad English. No, it wasn't bad English at all. I totally got what you were saying. And he also, this emailer kindly gave me quite a few, speaking of Valve and Steam, he gave me quite a few Steam keys to give away. And now I've talked about this often, or a couple weeks ago, that I was going to start doing giveaways, and I am going to do a giveaway now. We'll handle it right here. And this week, I have a bunch of Steam keys to give away. Other people have given me Steam keys to give away, and I really appreciate it, because it gives me the chance to, it gives me incentive to interact with you. It gives us the chance to interact with each other very well. And so here's what I want. If you want a Steam key, and this week it's going to be Crusader Kings 2. I love this game. Okay. And it comes with not every DLC. Otherwise I'd be giving you literally, hundreds of dollars worth of game here. Not that I'd mind giving that away, but email me. You can email me, sovereigntech@riseup.net. Okay. And tell me how you feel about Sovereign Tech being 2 times a week, or if you would rather the show be longer. Which of those would you prefer? So shoot me an email, and then I'm pretty much going to go eeny, meeny, miny, mo out of all those emails. And whoever I go eeny, meeny, miny, mo out of, I'll send the Steam key for Crusader Kings 2 along with some of its DLC. And I'm going to do this every week. I'm going to do a giveaway every week for a while. I have a lot of keys to give away, and also other listeners have given away keys for me to give away. And I want to make it worth it to you to email me. Okay. To give me info. So many people, they just want the free info, and I'm not saying you wouldn't be willing to give me that, of course. But if I can give you something out of it, great. And there's going to be other things in the future too, where I may ask you to perhaps tweet at other show hosts to see about getting me on their show. We'll do full guerrilla marketing here. Okay. So anyway, yeah, just email the show, sovereigntech@riseup.net, and let me know, do you prefer a twice a week show or a longer show? Or, honestly, you could even tell me, just keep it as is. You can, there you have 3 options. Understanding's a 3-edged sword, right? So there's all 3 ways for you to go with. Anyway, emailer, thank you so much. Good luck to you in Brazil, and please keep the emails coming. I thought that was very well thought out and a lot of great questions there. And it was great to talk about it. It was great to talk about it. Thank you. We'll be back with more.
Hey, everybody, it's Stephanie. I am the Sovereign Tech producer. But did you know I am also a voiceover artist? Yes, it's true. I make audiobooks, commercials for your business. I narrate explainer videos. Pretty much any audio project that you can think of, I'm probably willing to work on it, or I have worked on it in the past. And if you want to hear some samples of my previous work, or you want to find out a little bit more about what I do, then I encourage you to check out my voiceover website, which is smvoice.info, smvoice.info. Now back to Sovereign Tech.
Agent Sovereign, go to this webpage and follow. What kind of webpage is this? Is that Natalia? I better go to the
Website of the Week.
It is time for Website of the Week, where I cover a website that's useful. Sometimes it's just funny. Sometimes it's terrible. In this case, it's one of the funny ones. And speaking of hierarchical jobs and, top-heavy corporations, this is a doozy for that if you want to create one of those. And this is the bullshit job title generator, actually, not creator. And I actually got this website recommended by the Duchess of Debauchery, Stephanie Murphy. And this is so good. And it really does go to show, like, because when you think about it, like, you have these companies, oh, I'm the chief vision officer of blah, blah, blah. And it's just like, and you do what? Well, I give them vision. And I mean, it gets crazy, you know, or even like, CTO. I mean, there's new job titles created all the time, which at the end of the day, even if you got the person to talk to them honestly, they'll even tell you that, well, it's BS. It's just getting my name up there as like a personal favor of some kind, or as, or it's a way for me to, it's like a marketing employee or a marketing ploy so that I'll advertise it on the thing that I do, blah, 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 blah. It's just, it gets crazy. And so this is really fun. If you want to do that, you can generate some bullshit job titles here. And let's see, what's the first one we've got? Legacy Security Specialist. I have no idea what that does. Let's try another one. Central Optimization Analyst. Well, it's got the word central in it, so that's obviously bullshit. That's a terrible idea. Investor Markets Developer. I mean, and this goes on for days. It doesn't stop. We'll try some others. Product Metrics Administrator. Forward Division Representative. What is the Forward Division? I have no idea. Regional Branding Architect. I mean, and actually this raises an interesting point about, hierarchical businesses, and, that being companies in comparison to, like, say, co-ops or collectives. And yes, that is important to keep in mind. If you look up the dictionary definition of a collective, you might find out it's not such a terrible thing. It's actually a good business model, a collective. And so, but it really brings to fore, the fact that, look, because how many times do you hear about this stuff in real life? That's the funny thing, is that, yes, this has made a website because it is so prominent out there, in the corporate world. And it's all to do what? Honestly, it's all to make somebody feel like they're somehow important, or to assuage their lack of proper pay, or their whatever that means. Value subjective. Okay. I have no minimum wage to discuss, or their lack of, advancement within a company. It's like, okay, well, I mean, just picture this scenario. This guy, Johnny's complaining about his job, but he's a great worker, and really no one else is going to clean the toilets. We got to give him we got to make him feel better about what he's doing. What are we going to do? Well, let's generate a bullshit title. We're going to call him the Regional Metrics Orchestrator. I just generated that one, actually. Or, I mean, it gets out of hand. It is so ridiculous. And also, when this kind of thing becomes popular, it's a clear sign that your industry that you happen to be in is probably in some kind of bubble, or again, you're just really trying to assuage, some of your workers that really you should be, this is not the way to be treating them, is by throwing them what are effectively, ribbons and awards, to athletes and soldiers and whatever, and they're no better and they have no actual value. Let's try some others here. Dynamic Functionality Specialist. What does it take to be dynamic? Dynamic Tactics Strategist. I'm scared to death of what that's all about. Senior Research Orchestrator, District Data Administrator. And I mean, actually, that one kind of makes a small degree of sense, I suppose. But National Interactions Strategist. Boy, who the hell would want that job? And actually, if you just go to I specifically highlighted the job title one because I thought that was perhaps the funniest of the bunch. But if you just go to bullshitjob.com, normally you have to go to bullshitjob.com/title. If you just go to bullshitjob.com, there's a whole bunch of these that you can go through, and it really it's very funny. In fact, there's even a quiz: is your job bullshit? So you can have a great time on this website. It's good to do something funny, especially when I talk about such overly depressing subjects on this show. I don't always want to talk about it, and I certainly don't always want to talk about blockchains. Anyway, I'll be back with more.
Hey, look! Got an energy spike. Hold on! Launch. No! Humming the Narn back to the Stone Age wasn't enough for you?
Then we heard it. The sound of something terrible being born.
This is madness.
Station 3 to Commander Ivanova.
Centauri have launched a full-scale assault.
Time is come and gone! It's our turn now!
2 million tons of spinning metal, all alone in the night. A world where empires rise and fall, where dreams are born and die, where war and hatred are challenged by love and faith. In the third age of mankind, an age plagued by an evil empire that seeks to destroy humanity. It is our last, best hope for peace, for victory, for freedom. It is Babylon 5.
Babylon 5 is available for download on your favorite torrent site. See it now to experience the greatest show in television history. Babylon 5. Ride a bike so well.
I don't know if I can get us away from that helicopter. Don't you have a gun?
Oh, there's never a need for lethal force. I'll handle this.
How did you do that?
We'll be fine. A quick hack solves everything.
Hacksec.
It is time for Hacksec, where we cover issues of hacking and security. And this week we've got a doozy. This was actually, and I'll link to it in the show notes where I originally heard about this, because I think it was one of the most interesting podcasts I had heard maybe in years. And it came from GigaOM. GigaOM has a Internet of Things podcast that has almost entirely to do with IoT. Of course, that's short for Internet of Things. And they talked about a couple things. First, they talked about the first half of it was actually really interesting, because they talked about how there's a competitor to Roomba, which, of course, is the robotic vacuum cleaner that operates completely on its own. And they talked about that quite a bit. It's coming from Dyson. And that was pretty interesting to hear about all kinds of home automation that was going on. And really, interestingly, this isn't the main thing I want to talk about, but interestingly, it really brought to fore to me that all of these, be it your tablet, maybe even your smartwatch or your smartphone, are really just turning into overblown, overrated remote controls. That's all they're becoming, by and large, and I think that is the direction that a lot of this crap is heading, or at least it's being rammed down your throat to be. But anyway, the more interesting part, and the very interesting part, perhaps more interesting than even the flop that BitNation I think is as far as its existence, is what they had a guy on from IBM. And I'm actually going to read from an article here from CoinDesk, and good for them for catching up on this. And it's IBM's role for blockchain in Internet of Things. IBM researchers are looking into, I would read the name of the guy that wrote this article. It's Nerman, but boy, then it's Hajdabergovich. I feel so bad. This guy's a great writer, and I cannot pronounce that name. IBM researchers are looking into the possibilities of using blockchain technology for the Internet of Things, or IoT, a term for the growing network of devices with basic computer-like capabilities that communicate over the web. The IoT is likely to bring a major change in the way we use technology, with interaction between connected everyday devices such as pacemakers, fire alarms, or air conditioning units, and humans increasingly becoming the norm. Now, IBM is examining the use of blockchain technology for an IoT distribution platform, backed by other peer-to-peer technologies. The system, dubbed ADDENDUM, will rely on 3 different technologies to resolve a number of issues related to IoT development and commercialization. Although it was conceived in IBM's labs, ADDENDUM is not an official Big Blue product. Big Blue, of course, is the nickname for IBM. Instead, it is an open source software to be released on GitHub. Well, that's nice that it's open source. ADDENDUM will employ blockchain technology in its distributed transaction processing engine that will allow IoT devices to communicate and interact with one another. Paul Brody, head of mobile and Internet of Things at IBM, told GigaOM that blockchain technology, and that's the guy that the interview is with, can allow IoT devices to understand what other devices around them are up to, and it can support different kinds of instructions and permissions. The blockchain could allow devices to track other devices and their relationship to them while maintaining security and offloading the power-hungry authentication process to the blockchain network. The devices could store their relationships with other devices via the blockchain, allowing them to authenticate other devices and users. IBM plans to use another peer-to-peer technology to ensure connectivity. BitTorrent, a protocol commonly used for file sharing, could be used to move packets of data on slow networks. Since many IoT devices will not have a wasteful high-speed modem and always-on connectivity, a peer-to-peer system like BitTorrent would provide a more robust network, the team says. The third technology to be employed in Adept is Telehash, a private messaging protocol with end-to-end encryption. Other services can be built on top of it, allowing secure communication between IoT devices. Now, I want to be clear on this. They are talking about, and if you listen to the interview, you can hear about this more, because I don't know necessarily that I don't think the article necessarily talks about it, but they want to, IBM is talking about, and granted, it's an open source project. Okay. So, the person in the interview clearly said, Paul Brody there clearly said that, we don't want people to depend on IBM. That's nice of them to say. Could we get that in legal writing somewhere? But regardless, I don't want any more contracts than already exist. He said that there's going to be a chip in everything, in a doorknob, in a light bulb. You pick the most benign, basic, thousands of years old technology, and maybe light bulbs thousands of year technology too, but that's another story, out there, and there's going to be a chip in it. All to do this kind of interaction. Now, this is really important that they talk about this, and I'm going to talk about the advantages here. I'm going to read on a little bit in a second. Okay, but I want you to keep that in mind. But no doubt about it, Internet of Things, if it is something that we are heading towards, to where you have the interconnected home, the smart life, whatever, the smart planets, like IBM calls it, nothing creepy about that, you're going to want this to be secure. And I'm glad that admittedly, I am very glad that it's getting discussed now, long before it is a market norm. Okay, so let's read about the multiple advantages here, according to Brody. Brody said there are two main reasons behind his team's decision to use peer-to-peer technologies. Cost is the primary factor, as managing all IoT devices in a centralized cloud would simply be too expensive in the long run. IoT devices are envisioned as low-cost, low-maintenance devices that should run for years, if not decades. Kudos to IBM for recognizing that household appliances, household items should last virtually forever, like that washing machine that's in your basement that's like 30 years old, right? We've all had one of those, no doubt about it. So at least at face value, there's not this idea, this is going to allow us to sell a new thermostat every 2 years. The sheer number of devices represents a big challenge too. Speaking at the Intel Developer Forum 2014 on Tuesday, Intel CEO Brian Krzanich said the company expects as many as 50 billion connected devices will be deployed by the end of the decade. Market research firm Gartner has given the more conservative estimate that 26 billion IoT devices will be installed by 2020, but said even this number will generate incremental value exceeding $300 billion. With such figures in mind, it is clear that Brody's decentralized peer-to-peer system could tap into a huge emerging market. Another factor is the business model itself. IBM's Brody said the blockchain could lead to new business models for all companies involved in the space, allowing IoT devices to share data, processing power, bandwidth, and even electricity. Brody outlined his vision for a decentralized Internet of Things in the GigaOM podcast. So it's linked in this episode, so I'm not going to add it to the, you can just click on this link and you can find it through that. I won't add it in the appendix. In essence, the blockchain approach proposed by Brody would not have to rely on scarcity like Bitcoin, which means it could operate without industrial scale mining, which is slowly taking over the Bitcoin network. And yeah, sure. So somehow it'd use a degree of proof of stake. Now, I really recommend listening to this podcast. It's not long. And if you want to skip the first half, you can, though even that was interesting as far as a preview of what people are thinking. Okay. And in this, I mean, no doubt about it, Paul Brody starts saying, yeah, look, this blockchain thing, this ledger, this is all about contracts. So we're going to have government to device contracts. He said that. We're going to have device to device contracts. We're going to have person to person contracts. We're going to have all these contracts. And oh God, can you just picture all the anarcho-capitalists just shooting jizz everywhere, hearing about all these great contracts that are going to come around, right? Because how do you get somebody to do something? You have them sign a piece of paper and you keep shoving it in their face. That's how you keep order in society, right? Anyway, regardless, I just went on a little rant right there. So this is their solution to security within the Internet of Things. Again, like I said, I agree that people need to talk about how this happens, but let's talk about the problems here. And this harkens back to BitNation as well. I'm speaking for both the Internet of Things and of BitNation. When you start putting everything on software, you are putting everything onto something that is far too easily controllable by a kid with a head for numbers and an Etch-a-Sketch. Far too controllable by anybody with the right malware, with the right virus, especially if it runs off of a standard like this. And people say, well, it's all open source. Oh, yeah, it's all, you have the option. You don't have to buy the Internet of Things. Maybe it'll never be a law, or maybe it will. Just like, funny, I can't buy an incandescent bulb anymore in the United States of America. People will say these technologies are good. They may be, but not when you have control structures involved, whether they be on a blockchain or if they be in Washington, D.C. When you have domination structures, when you have organizations of control, no, this stuff is not something you want implemented. Or if you do, you certainly don't want it to be a standard. You don't want it to be a one ring that can rule them all. It's the same thing with BitNation. Well, it's voluntary. You don't have to take part in it. Well, that's nice, but that doesn't change the fact that there's still, that it doesn't highlight the fact that there's still a ton of people that really, they're not interested necessarily in voluntary interaction. They are just interested on being at the top themselves. They still want that domination. They still want that control. They still want that governance. It doesn't change the fact that the human condition didn't grow. It just shifted sands to the other side of the box. This is what's up and coming. And in fact, honestly, I don't mind saying, it creeped me out a little bit. It's just how well IBM seems to understand blockchain technology and just how quickly they're implementing it into something that's still so fresh and new. Yeah, my conspiracy radar honestly went off. And I was like, wait a minute, you guys figured this out just a little too fast to have not been thinking about it for a really long time. And blockchain technology isn't that old. Anyway, keep an eye out for this. I think the Internet of Things in general is a bad idea as it stands, as society stands as it is today. But you can email me and tell me I'm wrong or share your thoughts. I'll be back with more. Hey, everybody. I really appreciate all of you that listen to Sovryn Tech. I hope you have as much fun listening to the show as I do making it. And hey, if you have a good time listening or learn something from listening, you can donate to the show. Just look in the show notes at sovryntech.com. There you'll see addresses for Bitcoin, Blackcoin, Next, Litecoin, whole slew of ways to donate to the show. And believe me, I'm not going to complain if you only send 2 millibits or what equates to $2, unlike some people. But, also you can donate via PayPal using the affiliate links on the left-hand side of sovryntech.com. And oh yes, please feel free to use those affiliate links. You can also help the show by circling me on Google+, following me on Twitter, or following Sovryn Tech on SoundCloud. Anything you can do to help, believe me, it helps. So I love all of you, and thank you so much for listening. Now let's get back to more Sovryn Tech. Well, looks like we made it out of the country. Good driving. Let's find some place to relax.
Somewhere with a nice big bed, I think. Let me pull up an app.
Sounds good to me.
Software of the Week.
It is time for Software of the Week, where I cover software that's useful. Sometimes it's terrible. Sometimes it's, it could even be a bit of a joke of software. Sometimes it's a warning. And anyway, before I get into that, I can't say enough. The reaction I get, whether I'm speaking somewhere or whether I talk about it on the show, to where people are just they hate it when I say don't blockchainize everything. They think it's ridiculous. I hope this show, I took the time, I hope this show shows you that yes, people do want to blockchainize everything, and that it may, and hopefully I planted some seeds of the idea that maybe that's not such a good thing, because we do have to pause and reflect. When you find yourself, what's the old Mark Twain saying? When you find yourself on the side of the majority, it is time to pause and reflect. And it seems like blockchain technology is really taking off. So let's think about it. That's all. All right. Now, this is something that I found that this is so cool. If you are a Windows user, I am a Windows user. I like other operating systems better, but I am a Windows user. And and I know a lot of my listeners are, and if you're looking for that great web browser that you just never heard of, I found it. Oh, yes. And it is good. Because, Chrome's great for what it does. There's a lot of advantages to how you use Chrome, but Chrome is becoming so monolithic. Maybe you don't want Google to take over your Windows machine so much. Maybe you're a fan of Microsoft, and hey, that's cool. They might be ironically, and this is a bit of a shift for me, but honestly, they might be the least evil of the big tech companies. Might be. Okay. So, maybe you're a fan of Microsoft and you don't want to be, using Google's shit or whatever. And Firefox is so, maybe you have a problem with Firefox's, recent implementation of Adobe DRM, and who knows what else. And of course, Firefox always runs a bit slushy. So, but what I'm about to tell you is only available for Windows at this time. And it's called Pale Moon. And you can go to palemoon.org to check it out. And it is based off of Firefox, so it's using the Gecko engine, which I like. I love the Gecko engine. But here's the beauty is that Pale Moon, totally open source. They've stripped out a lot of the more, shall we say, consumer-friendly BS that Firefox has been implementing recently, over the past few years. So they stripped all that out. They've released, there's even a 64-bit version available of this, and it works really well. I've tested it. It worked with Flash, because that was one of the big problems with 64-bit browsers, is they didn't work with Flash. If you need Flash, it still works within this. And it is fast. It is so fast, especially when it's taking advantage of the 64-bit processor, which even Firefox doesn't really do. So this is a huge upgrade. Most of the add-ons also, most of the add-ons or extensions for Firefox, they will work with this. I was very easily able to get pretty much anything, the EFF, HTTPS everywhere. That worked in it. AdBlock worked in it. All the big stuff. NoScript, I got NoScript to work in it just fine. And it has that classic look that Firefox had up until just recently, which I'm not opposed to the new way Firefox looks. It looks pretty sleek, but it kind of has that power button that a lot of people have actually made extensions to bring back into Firefox. That power button where in the top left, it said Firefox, and you could click on it, and then it brought down like all your abilities, but it kept your overall screen real estate looking really sleek. And Pale Moon did a good job of keeping that there. Also, there is Pale Moon Sync, which will allow you to, sync your browser and your bookmarks and cookies between other Pale Moon browsers. This isn't going to help you on an Android end, okay? But it really works very well as far as on desktops and laptops. I like it, and it's got again, to get this nice stripped down browser, to have that again, and to use such a trusted engine as Gecko is. I think is just top notch. Like it's the browser. If you are a Windows user, it is the browser to use, and it's funny too, because not only, Linux, a lot of Linux distributions are running away from Firefox as well. And like even Debian, if you use Debian, I love Debian. Debian uses, what is it, Iceweasel? I think it's called Iceweasel, Ice something. That is actually it's just kind of the same idea, where it's a Firefox clone that just has a lot of the non-open source stuff stripped out of it. Okay. So this is something that's happening all over the place. And to be able to get that kind of ability really well done in Windows is priceless. And you can donate to them. And in fact, for their donations, they accept both Bitcoin and Litecoin. So the guys at Pale Moon are on top of this stuff. Okay, they deserve a good donation and they deserve the use of their products. They also offer, and you can find it through the website in the show notes at sovereigntech.com at the Pale Moon website. They also offer a Thunderbird alternative. And a lot of people, including Lifehacker, says that they like it better than they like even Thunderbird. I use Claw's Mail, so I don't know about how Thunderbird's working these days. But you can check those out. Pale Moon, great stuff. Probably the best browser on Windows right now. I'll be back with more.
What does freedom mean? Tune in to LRN.FM to find out. LRN.FM is the Liberty Radio Network, a collection of live talk radio and podcasts, all coming from a principled pro-liberty perspective. LRN.FM show hosts aren't left, right, or conspiracy kooks. You can tune in 24/7 to LRN.FM via your phone, computer, satellite, and more. Listen free anytime at LRN.FM. That's LRN.FM.
Oh, Natalia.
Oh, it feels so good. I'm so close.
I know what you need.
The climax.
It is time for the climax, where I talk about whatever I want to talk about. I don't cover anything. I could talk about a movie, a TV show. I could talk about, I don't know, take your pick. I've done poetry. And on this week's climax, I feel like the show has been like so deadly serious. I want to have a little fun. I want to kind of end on an upbeat note. And so I'm going to talk about a movie. And the movie is arguably, and how many times does a person say this, right? Oh, it's one of the best of all time. Oh, it's one of my favorites of all time. But this one really is. This really is one of my favorites. It was very inspirational to me when I was a teenager. This is a movie that came out in 1998. And for those that had listened to my top 8 episodes in the past, I did a top 8 of sci-fi movies. And I had mentioned in that how 98 was arguably the greatest year of movies of all time. Or at least it was certainly one of them, along with like 1987 maybe. And this came out in 98. And the movie is The Mask of Zorro. Now, a lot of people might be laughing about this because obviously, Zorro is known for what? Wearing triple black, right? Well, certainly it was one of the I still get asked that question. What is this man in triple black thing? Why do you always wear all black? What's the whole business? And I always say, well, there's a lot of sources that it comes from. There's tons. It's hard to pin it down to just one. And usually if I am going to pin it down to just one, it's just because I've always wanted to be a ninja, or I was just, kind of copying Batman. But of course, it really can't just be Batman, because through by and large, a lot of Batman's career, he wore blue and gray, didn't wear black. That wasn't really a thing until, when the Tim Burton movie came out. Was it 89? Anyway. Mask of Zorro. So yeah, the reason I wear black is for a lot of reasons. A lot of the cool heroes always seem to kind of wear it, as well as the people that sort of defied authority, which certainly Zorro is a very revolutionary character. Definitely, talk about somebody taking on the state and fighting for the people. Zorro hits that on the head, right? He really should be, to some degree, even though he's a Don, he was originally a Don, so there's some hierarchy there. He really is kind of an anarchist hero. And I'm not the first person to say that he really epitomizes that. And Mask of Zorro is, there's a great comic book series. In fact, Dynamite is still doing a great Zorro comic book series that I love. I read it as soon as it comes out. I'm all over it. Now they're even doing Lady Zorro, which is phenomenal. Huge fan. Love it. But Mask of Zorro was really kind of, it was a culmination of all the great elements of the character, and of the mythos of the character. And it just came out in full display. It really did. Martin Campbell did a great job directing it. The fight sequences were never too over the top, but they were still fun. The sword play was great. The training was great. Of course, Antonio Banderas is in it playing the titular role, as being passed on by one of my all-time favorite actors, Anthony Hopkins. And they do a great job. And of course, Catherine Zeta-Jones is in this, and she is, boy, at that time, I mean, just a stunning woman. I mean, absolutely beautiful. This is, and shortly after, I think she did the movie Entrapment, or maybe shortly before, with Sean Connery. And, this is really her, kind of her heyday, of her acting career. And, oh man, she was stunning in this movie. And also played a very tough woman. Like, that was the cool thing too, is that she actually sword fought with Zorro and kind of bested him almost to a degree, which that was great to see, that kind of, empowered femininity on display. Powerful women. There's very few things more exciting than that. Antonio Banderas does a smash up job. He really pulls it off with a lot of passion, very romantic character that he delivers really, really well. And also, one of the lesser talked about things with this movie, before I get into the overall plot, is the score. This is kind of overlooked. James Horner did the score, and he pulled out all the stops. This is a sweeping epic of a score, a lot of strings, but then of course it brings in a lot of, a lot of trumpets and all that business, to give it that Mexican or Spanish flair. And, and there's a love song in it too. That's really, really great. And sadly, I don't think this is an album that's available on like Spotify or Google Play Music All Access. So you might have to go find the download for this. I could be wrong about that because they update the catalog all the time. But it's really worth having because it is an awesome score. Beautiful, very romantic, lots of fun. There's points where you just want to dance to it. There's points where you want to swing from a chandelier to it, all the good stuff. And great scores don't get highlighted enough anymore, because I think a lot of times, because really Hollywood today, in a lot of the movies, are going for this, and I don't know the name of it off the top of my head, but scores today are more about evoking tension, a heightened tension, and not about melody. They're not about melody anymore. And I don't know if this started with Don Davis's work in The Matrix, where actually there's no melody at all in the entire soundtrack. That's really the first time it came to my attention. But nowadays, it seems like so much of like, maybe they'll have one big sweeping theme, but there isn't a lot of that great atmospheric music that brings on so much. Now, all the music is like usually one or two or three notes that just bring on some kind of tension. And so it's becoming a lost art, in my opinion, that, this music. And maybe that has something to say about music overall, because, I've theorized for quite a bit for years that sooner or later, I would think, you have a finite amount of instruments. You have a finite amount of notes that humans can hear and that instruments can produce. Sooner or later, mathematically, wouldn't you run out of new music at some point? And I've always wondered, is this why mashup's so popular? And I like mashup fine. I think it's a great style. But just a curiosity. So maybe that's what's happening. Maybe nobody can write great scores anymore. I don't know. Hans Zimmer seems to still pull out the stops, but even he will use that heightened tension method that I talked about. Anyway, enough about soundtracks. Let's talk about the movie a bit. So you have this character who is Antonio Banderas's character that, initially he is, he's an outlaw. Because the Spanish government is so oppressive in Mexico. And so his brother gets killed by a group of people. Actually, it's the U.S. government helping out, making kind of this unholy alliance with this one really power-hungry guy that's from Spain that's trying to kind of take over Mexico for the Spanish government again. And so you get this You know, I mean, so it's perfect. I mean, it's this really anti-government movie all the way, you know, through and through. So it's a lot of fun to watch because some movies are kind of tough to like it's tough to watch a cop movie now, right? Because you're like, yeah, I don't necessarily feel good about rooting for the police officer, especially when they're really brutal, like in a lot of modern films. You know, and so this is one where even years later, you know, over a decade later, it still holds up. And, you know, and you don't have, like, your principles don't get in the way, I guess, of enjoying it, you know. And so it's all about, you know, Zorro, Antonio Banderas' character becoming Zorro, getting trained as Zorro, and then trying to keep this plot from occurring. And it's incredibly exciting. Lots of, you know, tremendous action that is a lot of fun and not like I said, not too over the top. A lot of great romance, which is something that is really missing a lot of times from modern films, because a lot of times now it seems like the romance comes down to a woman is like, you know, being held captive and is beaten and beaten and beaten. And the hero comes in and saves her from all the beatings and saves her, you know, from all the really terrible stuff happening to her. And she falls in love with him merely based off of the fact that he came in and saved her, even if he never knew her before. And it's like, it creates this weird heroic expectation and platitude that I think a lot of people want to mimic at some point. In fact, I think it's a lot of the reason why a lot of liberty-minded people are so goddamn gun happy, is because they're hoping that at some point they get to save the girl and the girl will fuck them just because of that. And when they never actually want to do any work on themselves, you know. So anyway, so this movie's good for that, where, you know, yes, there is a rescuing of the female characters, certainly, but like the passion and the love and all that stuff gets built up in a really beautiful, you know, sexy, seductive way that seems to come from this sort of thing. And it's enjoyable to see. And it's great to see the good guy really be the good guy. You know, it's great to see. Some people consider it tropes, but I find it almost annoying a lot of times when the good guy has to be this really brutal and vengeful character, like super vengeful. I understand, you know, like his brother gets killed in it. Sure, that propels the story forward. But I'm talking about like these movies where people are just like, they get sadistic in their quote unquote heroism. And so it's good to see some good old-fashioned heroism. In fact, that's one of the things I really liked about Guardians of the Galaxy, was it was just, you know, straight up good guys, bad guys, you know what I mean? It was really just like basic, fair, and it was kind of inspirational to see. I think The Mask of Zorro is still a very inspirational movie to watch. And, you know, and it's kind of it almost has a rags to riches flair to it, which is really fun to see. You know, there's a whole lot going for it. You know, and it stands against something we've talked about through this whole episode. It stands against domination structures, and it does it in a classy way. And of course, Zorro wears triple black, which not, you know, that's just a nice touch. And it's funny. There's a lot of comedy in the film, and the comedy really delivers. Like it's cheesy at times, but it actually, it really, the punch of the comedy is just fantastic. It's a perfect film. And it had a sequel too, The Legend of Zorro, which came out way too late. And that was a fine film too. Nothing necessarily wrong with it so much, though it didn't handle the tropes in such a positive, or not the tropes, but it didn't handle everything the characters in such a positive light as Mask of Zorro did. So I don't necessarily recommend watching Legend of Zorro. It wasn't that great. Like, I thought Catherine Zeta-Jones's character got really downplayed and relegated to real tropes that are not good in that. And so, but that is out there. I mean, the movie was popular enough to where they decided to make a sequel. They should have made the sequel like 2 years later. Kind of like Men in Black, how Men in Black 3 came out way too late. And so same deal there. So not necessarily recommending Legend of Zorro, but Mask of Zorro is just it's a perfect film, in my opinion. It is an absolute perfect film. Like, I have no I give it 10 out of 10. I really have no qualms with it. So check that out if you want. It is a good time. It is a really good time. Anyway, hope you enjoyed the show. Don't worry. There's solutions to everything, and we'll talk about them more in future episodes of Sovryn Tech. And don't forget to catch me, coinsinthekingdom.com. I'll be at Coins in the Kingdom, and I'll be giving a talk there about a lot of what we've just talked about now, but with some real solutions. So anyway, Carpe Lucem, everybody. I'll see you on the other side.
You just experienced Sovryn Tech. Go to sovryntech.com, that's SOVRYN tech.com, and connect with us there. Find links from today's show and catch our podcast feed. Sovryn Tech is copy heart. Copying art is an act of love, and love is not subject to law. So please share the show however you like. Welcome to the evolution.